Okay, so let's talk close combat.
Yes, let's. Axemen, Hatchermen. No, they're not in this, but they are good.
So aside from using like ranged weapons, there is a phase in BattleTech during the turn for physical attacks.
So right after combat comes physical attacks.
Yeah.
So all the damage from the combat phase is applied at the end of the combat phase. So if you've had any major structural damage or anything, then it will be applied before you hit the physical attack stage. So bear that in mind.
Yeah.
But this is basically the point where you are saying everything that we are physically doing to each other happens now.
Yeah.
Weaponry happened before, physical happens now.
Yeah. So there are a number of options that a unit can take. So we're talking just BattleMechs at this stage, although vehicles can also do their own sort of form of ramming, which is like a charge, things like that. But
So
we'll just focus on BattleMechs for the moment.
Yeah. So you've got punching.
Yep.
If you have functioning arms, you can punch. Kicking. If you have functioning legs, you can kick. Then you have a charge, you have a push, and you have death from above.
And you also have clubs. You can club, so you can pick up like girders from a building and just use. You need two hands to do it. You can start wailing on people with that as well, which is kind of cool.
I forgot that's in there, isn't it? Yeah.
One thing to remember when you're doing physical attacks: if you've used a weapon on a location, say your arm or legs or whatever, you cannot use those for a physical attack in the same phase.
So a lot of mechs, especially lighter mechs, have a main weapon in their arm. So they'll have a laser on the arm, or they'll have SRMs on the arm, or something like that. If you use those weapons in the combat phase, you can't use that arm. So yeah, it is very important.
Yeah. A lot of people say, well, why do you put weapons on the arms then? Why not just put them on the appropriate torso, which can still shoot into that arc and things like that, and just leave the hands and the arms free? That's fair enough, but if you torso twist, you can actually bring your arm around to essentially the rear arc.
Yeah.
That's the advantage of having the arm side of things.
So your arm is on, say, the right-hand side, and you are facing this way, but if you torso twist now, your arm is basically facing at the back.
Yeah.
And it means that you've got a bit more maneuverability as far as shooting goes.
Yeah, so that's why you'll find that there are a lot of weapons actually still on the arms.
Yeah.
So
provided you haven't used those weapons, you can still punch.
Yeah.
So things like a locust, where they don't actually have a functioning arm, they've just got a weapon there. They can't punch, but they can still kick.
Yeah. Although there are, as you start losing bits and pieces as well, you'll start getting penalties to attacking as well. Your internal damage can get quite bad.
Yeah. So the most important part of physical attacks is they don't use your gunnery skill, they use your piloting skill. So your piloting skill is almost always higher than your gunnery skill, which makes it harder to do these things. But I'm pretty sure it follows basically the same Gator standard thing.
Yeah.
You just use your piloting skill instead of gunnery skill. So you take your base skill, you add for your movement, you add for the target movement, you add other stuff. Generally speaking, there'll be some sort of modifier for every physical attack. So for instance, kicks get a -2 automatically just for being a kick. And then you add... But you don't add for range.
No, that's right, because it have to be
obviously hero-based
contact. And you have to be
in
the front arc as well. So,
and all of those modifiers added to or subtracted from your piloting skill base becomes the number that you need to roll equal to or over in order to connect. You can do 2 punches in a turn.
That's right. If both functional arms are there, you can swing away.
And your punch does your weight. So all the damage for physical attacks is based around the weight of the mech. So big, heavy mechs have really solid punches. I think your Battlemaster was kicking me for like 18 points or something.
That's right.
So, yeah, and whereas something like a Locust will kick for 4 points.
Yeah.
So, but it's still effective.
Why would you punch instead of shooting weapons? The advantage is?
Your punch has a restricted location table.
Yeah.
And your kicks have a restricted location table. So if you want to focus on, say, the upper body and the head of a mech, then punching is an effective way to cut out all of those other locations that you don't really care about.
That's right.
Right? And it's, instead of 12 on 2d6 to hit a head, it's 6 on 1d6 to hit a head.
Yeah. So you've got an upper, so you've got your upper and lower body location. So BattleMechs that are at the same elevation facing off, if they punch, they roll 1d6, and that's where you hit. So they're working on the top part of the body.
And if you kick on, like you're standing at the same level and you kick, then you roll on a table that tells you which leg you're going to hit.
Yep. Which is straightforward. 1 to 3 and 4 to 6.
Yep.
And if you're kicking on the right side, you only hit the right leg. So if you don't really like memorizing tables, then kicking and getting in the right position.
But if you've got, say, a battle master or something like that with a huge amount of damage in the legs, then getting into position for a kick can be the thing that does it, because trying to pepper it with weapons fire can sometimes just take forever to make that lucky hit on the leg. But if you can get on that side of the mech, so it's the right leg that's really damaged, and you can get on the right hand side and pull off a kick, you're going to hit it 100% of the time. So,
and if you've got one level of difference of elevation, and you're side by side, you kick the lower person, and the lower person can punch the upper one because of the height difference.
Yeah,
so,
but you use the different hit location tables.
The kicker will roll on the punch because he's higher up, so that's
which is cool.
That's a lot of damage to the upper section, especially if it's a battle master doing it.
And again, something large punching on the kick location table against something small like a locust, that would be painful.
Yeah, and potentially two shots at it. So if you miss one of them, you can still And if you're kicked, if you are successfully kicked, then you also have to do a piloting check.
Yep. And if you miss a kick, you have to make a piloting check.
That pilot has to do the check. So there's a bit of a trade-off with the kick, but I don't know. I find that it sort of gets done on block regardless. So there was, like one of the games we played recently, there was a moment where you really had to weigh it up because it was from the scenario, and this is why scenarios are so good, because there's like certain criteria you've got to meet.
It puts a little bit of extra pressure on. I know I had to weigh up whether to make the kick or not based on the piloting skill of my inferior pilot, but it was well worth it. It was worth it. It it can go bad.
Pushing is good as well.
Yes. So a push or a charge. Well, a charge is where you end your movement next to them and then do a physical attack that actually barges them out of the way.
Yeah. You multiply your damage based on how fast you've moved. How far you've moved, I should say.
And the push is where you're actually stopped, standing next to each other. You've done all your other stuff, and then you just sort of shove them.
Yeah.
And that can be useful in when you have different levels. So they've introduced different levels of terrain in this. So if you can get someone up high and then push them off, then they'll actually take fall damage from going down to the other level. So it's very useful.
And of course, the sitting on the edge of the board.
Yes.
Which is cheeky scenario win, but there you push them off the board, you're out of the game sort of thing.
So that's basically the cheese, is if you don't want your back armor to be hit, then you can just back up against the map, the edge of the map. But if you then get pushed off, then you're out of the game.
That's it, you're out. So these little things you got to sort of give it a
weighing up.
Yeah. Urban combat is quite nasty.
The pushes and shoves and charges and things like that come into their own there. And I think you can do physical attacks against buildings from memory.
Yeah, you can attack it. You punch and kick.
So if you've got infantry sitting in a building, you can just kick the building and have it collapse on them, rather than wasting ammo on it.
It's an option.
It's always an option.
It's not addressed in that box set, but I'm sure they'll introduce extra stuff as they do it.
The classic death from above is in here though, isn't it? You can jump and end on a person's hex. I'm pretty sure they do death from above in here. Yep. So you've got if you make a normal everyday movement and you end next to someone, then you can do a charge. But if you make a jumping movement and end in the same hex as somebody else, then you're next to somebody else, then you're technically making a death from above.
You can,
yeah. So you're trying to jump and land on the other guy, and it's spectacular when it works.
But it's spectacular if it doesn't.
It's fairly spectacular, but
it's a bit embarrassing.
Yeah.
But
I don't
that's
think
a lot
I've.
of damage on the upper section if you pull that
Yeah.
off.
It's
just
basically a
it's not-
double kick to the upper locations or something.
No, it's the distance. It's like a charge attack, but you're just applying it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can do a horrendous amount of damage, and yeah, it is a fancy way to finish someone off. But yeah, have a good pilot for it, because if you screw it up, you end up landing on the floor and damaging yourself, and all sorts of nasty stuff happens.
But there's your game can change in the physical attack phase if everything's
definitely.
where it should be. So
Yes.
I mean, there's other equipment it's not in this box set, but it's in the main books and things like that. So there's, like Tarron mentioned, the mech called the Hatchet Men, or the Axemen.
Yep.
Both mechs have a hatchet, which is like they basically do extra damage on a punch because they've got a big axe.
It's basically just a big metal mech-sized axe, and you can hit people with it. And there's another one that I like called the Mantis that has the claws, the Solaris claws, which is really cool. And if you go through the tech manual there's all sorts of physical damage, physical attack, weaponry, equipment, all that sort of stuff. And you can do some really cool little battles with just mechs with just different types of physical damage weapons. It's really cool.
Yeah, so if you've been playing for a while and you've got a fairly good grasp of the rules, it's a good option to have a look at those and sort of spice up your game a bit.
Yep.
But to begin with, just stick with the basics. You're punching, you're kicking, pushes, all that sort of thing. Like you'll see the advantage of all of them depending on what's happening on the battlefield. But they are definitely worth looking at.
Yeah. And you can do some seriously large amounts of damage with almost no. I don't think any of them take heat, do they?
No, physical attacks do not generate.
So none of it generates heat, and as long as you've got a reasonable piloting skill, you've got a solid chance of taking off. Well, you've got a fairly solid chance of managing at least a kick. As long as you haven't got any internal damage or anything like that, and a decent piloting skill, you've got a solid chance of getting a kick in there. And if you've got a decent sized mech, it does a lot of damage.
It does a lot of damage. It's worth considering. Yeah, it's
Definitely.
worth considering an option.
Definitely
So when
worth
you're
it.
planning out your movement and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's it. Touching on physical attack phase. So some options there, things to consider.
And we'll have a look at more later,
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah. All right. See you
All
next
good.
time.
Bye. What's up?
I'm a vampire.